Meeting. Tonight, the public our discussion is about the electoral district maps, and I want to welcome all of you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I want to remind all board members to speak into the mic. I've been told that 5 times tonight, so please let's comply with the wishes. And at this time, I believe I will recognize Adam Mitchell from Tharrington Smith to guide us in this discussion. And Blake Isley is joining us on the video. Is that correct?
There he is.
Yeah.
Evening, board members, Dr. Jackson.
Speak into your microphone effectively.
Okay, I'm speaking into my microphone. I kind of got to
Out of shape if we don't follow those
bend down
rules.
a little bit here. Good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone. Thank you to the members of the community who are here. My name is Adam Mitchell. I'm a lawyer at Tharrington Smith in Raleigh, and along with my colleague Blake Esselstyn, who's joining us remotely today, we've served as the redistricting consultants for the school system during this process. In case there's any confusion, we are not talking about the assignment of students to schools at all during this process. This is only about electoral districts, so just want to make sure people are aware of that. Board members, you've essentially heard the presentation that I'm about to give. I'm going to move, or we are going to move very quickly. The purpose is just to set the scene, set the stage, leading into your public comment. If you need for us to slow down at any time, or if there are any questions, feel free to stop us, but we're going to just roll through it. And again, you've heard almost all of this before. All right, Blake, if we can progress with the slides.
You bet. And I'll rely on you to, I can't see if you're seeing the first one there.
We're on
There
we go. Yep. Perfect. Okay. So for local governments, there's 3 types of electoral systems. There are at-large systems, and that is where a candidate can live anywhere in the jurisdiction and voters can vote for all candidates. There are residency districts, and that's actually what the school system has had historically. And in that system, candidates must live in a particular district to run for office, but they're elected jurisdiction-wide. And again, we've had 6 districts here, 6 residency districts and 1 at-large member historically. For residency districts, redistricting is optional, but it's not required. For electoral districts, candidates must live in a particular district and they're only voted on by voters in that district. And that is the only system that requires redistricting based on the decennial census. So just an overview of what redistricting is, the Constitution, it's the US Constitution, requires a census every 10 years. The last census obviously was taken on April 1st, 2020. And local governments that use electoral districts are subject to the same one person, one vote requirements as our Congress and the General Assembly. And basically what one person, one vote means is that districts need to be nearly equal in population. For local governments like school districts, county commissions, cities, the rule, and this is developed over time in the law, is that no district should be more than 5% above or less than 5% below the ideal district size. So let's talk about what that would look like just in a hypothetical example. And you'll see in a second that this hypothetical is much simpler than the reality we needed to deal with Buncombe County redistricting. So imagine you have an administrative unit, 2020 census population, 120,000, 6 districts. The first step is to calculate the ideal district size, and to do that, you just take the number of people divided by the number of districts. In this case, 20,000 would be the ideal district size. Then again, because we're a local government, we're looking for that plus or minus 5% range. The high end, the plus 5% would be 21,000 people. The low range would be 19,000 people. And so for this jurisdiction, in a redistricting process, we would need all 6 of the districts to be between 19,000 and 21,000, and that would be in compliance with one person, one vote. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these next 2 slides, but long story short, the General Assembly in its infinite wisdom decided that the Buncombe County Schools should be moved from its historical system, 6 residency districts plus 1 at-large, to a system with 6 electoral districts and 1 at-large. There were 2 different bills to get us there, and the final bill, which was HB 142, gave the district quite a lot of flexibility in how to implement that. It also required a study looking at the potential consolidation between Asheville City and Buncombe County Schools. And my understanding that that's about to get started, but we have nothing to do with that process. All right, if we can proceed. Thanks, Blake. So I said that we had a little bit of a challenging situation here, and the challenge has to do with something or a concept known as split census blocks. And if you think about the census, the smallest building block that is used to aggregate data, to aggregate populations, is known as a census block. And we have a little excerpt of a map here, and the white lines represent the boundaries of census blocks. The green line in this slide is the boundary between Buncombe County and Asheville City Schools. What we'd like to see is the green line running right on top of one of the white lines or along the white lines, but you can see that that's not the case here. And so we have what are called split census blocks. And this block that's in the light green shade, according to the census, has 74 people. Because the census block is the smallest unit that the Census Bureau uses, we don't know how many people live on the Buncombe County side or the Asheville City side. And there's no way to know, at least with census data, and we have to use census data for redistricting. So we don't know where those 74 people live. They could all be on one side, they could all be on the other side, or any number in between. And that holds true for all of the split census blocks in our redistricting map. So the blocks, the challenge we have is that nearly all of the blocks are right at the boundary between the 2 school systems, and that would be where the orange meets white. Obviously, the white cutout is the Asheville City School District. And in this slide here, you'll see that the areas outlined in black are the divided blocks that have a population of greater than 0. And the populations of these blocks add up to 6,155 people. So if we were to take all of that uncertainty and put it all in the Asheville City jurisdiction, the Buncombe County jurisdiction would have 223,093 people. That's the smallest possible population for the Buncombe County schools. If we go in the other direction, the maximum scenario, if we move all the people in the split blocks to the Buncombe County side, the population in the Buncombe County schools would be 229,242. And so if we divide that minimum scenario by 6, the 6 districts we're trying to create, that minimum value is 37,182. For the maximum scenario, we take that upper end, 229,248, divide that by 6, and we get 38,208 people. Then we have to get the plus and minus 5%, both for the minimum and the maximum, and you'll see those numbers there. And what we have here on the yellow, and Blake, if you can just progress, I think they'll both come up on the same slide. You'll see a range that represents the minimum scenario and the maximum scenario. And thankfully, those two ranges have some overlap. And that is what we are looking for here, values that are within the range in both the minimum scenario and the maximum scenario. We know that that overlap will comply with one person, one vote, whether we're in the minimum scenario, the maximum scenario, or everything in between. And so specifically, districts that have a population between 36,298, 39,041 will be in that scenario for minimum, maximum, and everything in between. That gives us a window of 2,744 people that we need to target our districts within that range. So then we also need to keep in mind that individual districts can have scenarios, and so we need to take that into account as well, in that each district can have its own minimum and its own maximum scenario, and we need to make sure that each of those scenarios and everything in between still falls within that acceptable deviation. I'm actually not very good at math, so this is, thankfully we have Blake for that. All right, so that was meant to just give you an overview of the complexity. If you remember that one slide, 120,000 people, 6 districts, divide, and you're done, compared to what we had to do here with an overall minimum, overall maximum, minimums and maximums for each district, and creating a target range that we needed to get into. So obviously, a lot more complex than a traditional redistricting scenario, and it's all because of the split census blocks along the boundary between the two school systems. So just a review of how we got here. Our first meeting was in November of 2023, and we reviewed the basic principles of redistricting, really what I just covered up till now. We talked about the boundary challenges, and we talked about and discussed redistricting criteria. We'll come to that in a second. Our second meeting in December, Blake created 3 options, options A, B, and C. You just saw those out in the front room, and those options were based on the criteria that the board shared with us at that first meeting. We came back in January. The school system had an online forum for public comment. We reviewed that. We looked at options A, B, and C again, and we set the public hearing for today. So for criteria, or for redistricting, there's a set of what's often called traditional criteria. Things like compactness, contiguity, keeping communities of interest whole, trying not to split voting precincts, just a set of principles that have evolved over the years and that are often looked to in the redistricting process. I'm going to just focus on the criteria that this board gave us specific direction to emphasize. So one was to prioritize the high school enrollment districts, which really are the current residency districts. So basically, to deviate from those as little as possible, with the understanding that we were going to have to deviate from those to comply with one person, one vote. We were asked not to put 2 incumbents in the same electoral district, which is a traditional criteria, and it's rather important, especially in communities that have staggered elections, because when you put more than one incumbent in one district and you have staggered election cycles, you can get some real funny results where districts feel like they might not have representation for some period of time. So we did that. Communities of interest, the board asked us to look at elementary school attendance areas, and so we paid attention to that, as well as taking a look at the Shiloh community and seeing whether we could pull that into one district. And then we were also asked to maintain the pie wedge, we refer to it, configuration, where basically you have Asheville City as a donut hole and then 6 districts going around that all touched Asheville, and then 2 other districts on its borders. So we kept that. All right, I think, Blake, we're going to skip the next couple of slides. Let's go to the contiguity slide. Yeah, so for contiguity, the concept is obviously keeping all parts of a district connected to each other. It's quite standard. In this case, we started with non-contiguous districts. There are places along the border, and Blake may point those out, where you have islands of Asheville City in Buncombe County and vice versa, almost to the parcel level. So we didn't start with a contiguous map, and because we can't redraw the district, the boundaries of the two school districts, only the General Assembly could do that, we can't change that. I mean, we had non-contiguous districts to start with, and we couldn't do anything to change that. We drafted one plan that did not introduce any new non-contiguity, and two plans that did in a very, very limited, targeted fashion, and Blake will talk about that for a very specific reason also. All right, Blake, I'm going to turn it over to you here.
Great. Thank you, Adam. And good evening, everybody. Adam, can folks hear me there?
I think we're good, yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Great. Okay, so this is a slide that we looked at some length in the first meeting. And essentially, this is showing the high school enrollment districts, the attendance areas, and you can see how out of balance the populations are. So in this slide, I used colors from the high school team's mascots. But moving forward, we made the decision to switch to colors that were not representative of those attendance areas because we wanted to be clear that what we are talking about are election districts. They're different from the attendance districts. So for the remainder of the presentation, I will be using these colors. The bar chart again shows the fundamental challenge here, which is that if you're just looking at the attendance areas, which are what's shown on the map here, and you look at the bar chart on the right, these populations are not close to equal, not anywhere close. So for example, if you look at the green bar here, the green area, the green district needs about 10,000 additional people, whereas the pink district needs to be reduced by almost 10,000 people. And the orange district in between is going to have to give some of its population to green, and then the pink district will give some of its population to orange to try and make these bars equal. And you can see the threshold, the dotted line and the dashed line here represent the thresholds for acceptable population. And I presented some maps at previous meetings to give context. This is sort of major landmarks. This is showing where the Asheville City's jurisdiction is. This is showing the current high school attendance areas, some topography, then fading those back to be able to see other administrative boundaries. These are the elementary attendance districts. These are the locations of the high schools. These are the residences of the current board members. These were all things that were taken into account as we were drafting new districting plans or potential plans. This slide shows the maximum and minimum population for each of the elementary attendance districts. These are approximate for reasons I can get into if folks want to, but it's important to notice that in many cases they're equal, but because of the split blocks that Adam mentioned, particularly in this Woodfin area, you can see the maximum and minimum differ by roughly 3,000 people. Some others differ by 500 or a few hundred. But the uncertainty is primarily concentrated in this area here. So that affected the drafts. This is essentially just showing those with the colors. It may be helpful to refer back to this slide as we're discussing potential options. So this is shading the the various districts based on the census blocks. So you'll see that the colors here, even though I basically assigned the census blocks to a given attendance area, they don't line up. And that's, again, because the census boundaries and the boundaries of the attendance areas are not aligned. And so even before I started drafting new districts, there are places like up here and down here where they don't align. I have some slides showing particular examples. We can talk about those if we need to later. And then again, this is shading by the census blocks, and you'll notice how this changes as we go into option A. So you'll see that no longer do the colors mostly line up with the attendance areas, particularly where the population were more divergent from equal. For example, between the green, the orange, and the pink here, and the purple and the yellow here. And as Adam mentioned, the maps, the paper maps in the hallway had sort of a listing of the key elements of option A. I'm not going to review those. I'm going to trust, I've got a slide that sums them up. If folks would like to revisit that slide, I can, but I'm trusting that folks have had a chance to get familiar with what the elements of the plans are. I do want to point out, option A, as Adam mentioned, is the one that has no additional non-contiguities introduced. And what that means is that the uncertainty is all concentrated in the purple district, District 1, and the yellow district, District 6. All of the uncertainty, I should say, from this area is in those two districts. And that means there's not much wiggle room in terms of being able to fine-tune boundaries in those areas. These are the key elements of option A. In the Lakeshore Drive area, Adam mentioned all the existing non-contiguities. These island shapes are things that we have to work with. But this is the way the division between District 1 and District 6 looks like in option A. This is showing some of the, this is actually in the West Buncombe Elementary District. And just, this was related to a detail that we can talk about that has to do with that minimal amount of wiggle room when working with districts 1, 5, and 6. Moving on to option B, this does introduce one new non-contiguity. 2 split census blocks on the UNC Asheville campus would be assigned to District 3, the Orange District, and then other choices kind of in this area and this area about how the green and orange and pink populations are moved around. This shows that this allows for a cleaner division along Lakeshore Drive between District 6 and District 1. This shows a detail of Districts 3 and 4 in the Hendersonville Road and Sweeten Creek Road area south of Shiloh. And then option C has 2 additional non-contiguities introduced, the UNC Asheville one I mentioned before, as well as one along the Elk Mountain Scenic Highway area, which I'll show a detail of in a second. And there are other changes, for example, in the Fairview area, which I can revisit if needed. This is showing the split census block here that I assigned to the green district. They're just barely slivers of it. So this was one of the very intentional decisions to look at a non-contiguous situation being introduced, because there's essentially minimal likelihood that there's any substantial population here that would be in these floating sliver areas that would be assigned to green. And then you can see in the UNC Asheville area here, and then the Lakeshore Drive area here, this is what the division looked like. So there are some yellow census block portions that are not actually connected to District 6, the main contiguous portion of District 6. This is how Districts 3 and 4 would look in the Sweeten Creek Road and Hendersonville Road area south of Shiloh. Comparing that with option B, I made the point that with the numbers working out the way they do, the exchanges of population were really between these three districts. Districts 1, 6, and 5 were sort of a separate system, and then districts 2, 3, and 4 were a separate system. So potentially, if the board were to decide that they liked, what option A looked like over here, but option B looked like over here, there might be the potential to pick one option for one system and one option for another system. And when I mean system, I mean just these groups of 3 districts. There's an interactive map that hopefully folks have been able to explore if they want to. I've got that ready on my computer if we need to use it. The board asked us to do some change analysis for the various options to understand how many of the population in each district would be affected. I won't cover that in detail, but you can see the bottom line numbers here are that option A has the lowest percentage of population reassigned. And very quickly, what this means is the number of people that would be assigned to a different district in that option as compared to if the census blocks were purely assigned based on high school attendance districts. Again, I can come back and explain if folks have questions or need clarifications. I'm happy to go back and spend more time on this. And then this is a slide based on the most recent available online public feedback. And I can zoom in here. Adam, I think is ready to summarize what we're looking at here, and I will zoom in.
Yeah, so this chart shows two different types of data. One is the preferred plan for respondents based on their current district, and then also opinions of folks as to whether or not the school system should be redistricting in the first place. So overall, there were 118 responses. There were 53 folks who preferred option A, 32 for option B, and why don't we leave it right there, Blake? 33 for option C. Is there a way to slide it so we can see the district also? I'm not sure if we can fit it all on there. No, not really. Yeah, that's okay. You can see there which residency district the respondents were from. And then going down, there were 8 people who responded that they strongly support the change to electoral districts. 8 supported the change, 26 did not have an opinion, 19 did not believe that the change was needed, and 56 strongly disagreed with the change, with 1 person not answering. So with that, we will turn it back over to Chair Franklin to open the public hearing, and we will sit and listen, and then gladly get back up to help lead any discussion.
Okay. Thank you very much to both gentlemen for working with us and helping us try to understand the situation that we're in. At this time, I'd like to recognize Representative Ager, who is with us this evening, and we appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you all, and maybe I'm getting too close to the mic.
Representative.
Thank you all. I am Eric Ager, representative for District 114 in the North Carolina House. And first of all, just really want to thank the board for your really diligent effort to do this, as well as Blake and Adam and the rest of the team. It's a real mess, and we know it's a mess. And I want to apologize on behalf of myself from the General Assembly for putting you all in this position. You know, first of all, I think we've done a good job here of laying out the reasons that it really doesn't work. And while there may be an argument that electoral districts better represent the different communities of interest, this is an example of a good idea not working in practice. And so I really appreciate you all's work to try to fit this square peg into a round hole and try to make that work. I'll just go into a little bit of background. I mean, obviously, this was a partisan effort in the General Assembly. There are often efforts to, try to dictate things in Buncombe County that maybe people in Buncombe County don't want, but there may be a few here and there who do. And so it's a political decision made in Raleigh that's going to make the life of local folks here much more difficult. And so I want to apologize for that part of it. We have, and it's clear to me that there's kind of three things that are a problem. And the first, and something that we discussed on the House floor, is that, here in Buncombe County, we're pretty loyal to our high school districts, I went to Reynolds, and these plans obviously.
Forgive you for that.
What's that?
Forgive you for that.
Well, I'm a proud Rocket, and so this plan obviously has a big impact on the Reynolds district in particular, and so for my folks in Fairview, it's a big deal, and the second problem is that it creates a lot of confusion. So, it's not moving where any kids go to school, but when it comes time to vote, people in my district where I live, in a couple of these plans, will be voting for the representative in the Owen part of Buncombe County, and that just doesn't make sense. So in the end, I think this is a great example of really bad policy coming out of Raleigh, and without a clear understanding of what's going on in the ground. And that's clear. I think the lawyers laid it out, well, in that, the first time they passed it, it was untenable, absolutely impossible to do, and then they came back and made a few changes to make it legally possible, but still a bad idea. So thank you all for your diligent effort to look at this in a nonpartisan lens and in a way that tries to solve a really difficult problem, and look forward to hearing the rest of the comments. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I'll recognize Mr. Shatley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. It's now time for the public hearing portion of the meeting, and we look forward to hearing from you. As a reminder, speakers will be called in the order in which they signed up, and speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. There is a little timer over there, and when you have 30 seconds left, the yellow light will come on, and when your time is up, the little red light will come on as well. We do ask speakers to restrict your comments to the electoral district redistricting process. So if you came to speak about something else about the school system, you can do that at the board's next regularly scheduled meeting in April. Comments for this public hearing should only be about redistricting. Typically, the board does not address public comment, but if you have questions about this process or a specific question about a map, we are going to take those questions down, and then after everybody is finished speaking during the public hearing, we are going to do our best with the help of Blake and Adam to try to address those questions as well. So if you do have a question, please let us know. We'll try to get to that, but it will not be until after everybody's had an opportunity to speak. Right? Turn it over, Brianna.
Madam Chair and the board, we have 5 public comments this evening. The first one, Kim M.
I always know when people are calling me because they can't say my last name. So at the doctor's office, I'm always like, yep, that's me. My name is Kim Mataskella. I'm a parent of 2 boys that attend schools in the Reynolds School District. I'm also the president of the Cane Creek Middle School PTA. I did also, I wanted to thank the board for undertaking this task, and I appreciate the amount of thought that you guys have put into this criteria and how and what to consider when making these changes. It does feel significant, even though I know my children will stay in the same school district. Moving us from a countywide representation to what feels more territorial feels like it's significant to me. I understand the law has been passed and amended, and it seems like a done deal. But as a parent and a voter, I wanted to register my displeasure with the law and with having to do this, using scarce resources. We don't have time or money, and you guys are having to spend it on this process. From my perspective, it's trying to fix a system that was not broken, and the loss of residency districts with that countywide representation, I feel like will contribute to more division at a time when we really need to be cohesive. I tried to provide input on the maps. I looked at the presentations. I used the interactive map, and it was difficult to try to figure out and sort out the implications of each of the proposed options. And that would be a suggestion I would have, is to maybe make the input easier from our perspective, is to better understand the implications of each of the changes. Much like that population reassignment chart, it was interesting to see how many people would be affected by the changes, but what other implications, like option C, it breaks off a part of the Fairview district, which of course I'm partial to, but I like the aspect that it brings Shiloh together as a whole. So implications like that might make it easier for us to provide comment. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Sarah Disher-Ratliff.
Many current board members argue, why fix what's not broken? However, can we be certain it's not broken? Consider this. If the election process were perceived to be more fair, additionally, more individuals might have been inclined to run for board seats. Yet, have you considered that potential candidates might find the challenge of appealing to the entire county too daunting? Speaking from experience in the 22 election, I can attest it's no small feat. Claiming that the status quo since 1975 has worked overlooks the significant changes in Buncombe County population, which has grown by nearly 70% since then. This population growth has reshaped district demographics, leading to increased demands for more schools, specialized educators such as ESL programs, and district-specific parental concerns. How can you disregard these realities? In my campaign for the Reynolds District seat, I noticed many county residents were unaware that they could even vote for 3 school board seats. Despite efforts to inform voters, there was clearly a disconnect in the numbers. For instance, while 209,476 ballots were cast countywide, only 74,849 were for the Reynolds District seat. This disparity suggests a need for better voter education. In comparison, 115,282 voters participated in the Buncombe County Housing Bond Referendum, indicating over 40,000 missed votes in just our district alone. Analyzing previous elections featuring multiple candidates on the ballot may unveil unexpected results, suggesting that district-based elections could yield different outcomes. For example, in the 2018 election, a current board member only emerged victorious in 1 precinct in the area that would become their district under the proposed new system. Moreover, since 2008, out of 28 races, 8 were uncontested, giving the illusion that at-large elections are effective. Implementing district voting should heighten interest among concerned citizens to become more engaged in representing their district. I sincerely hope more parents and grandparents and community members become involved in the election process in the county, as it's unfortunate that only 58% of eligible voters turned out in the 22 midterm. Would establishing 6 district seats voting guarantee that representatives are better aligned with the needs of their district, while the remaining at-large seat serves as the cohesive element that unites everything. It's time for Buncombe County to acknowledge and appreciate the unique differences within each school district. I've seen firsthand the needs from North Buncombe are vastly different than those of TC or Inca. And while the new maps may not reflect actual attendance zones, voting within neighborhoods and close-knit communities remains intact. As a lifelong county resident and the mother of 4 students in 3 Buncombe County schools, I advocate for district elections. Will it solve every issue? No. It's a necessary change to ensure that voters' concerns and values of each district are heard.
Thank you.
Brandon Roberts.
Good afternoon, members of the board. After looking at the maps
Could I
extensively.
have your name, please?
My apologies, Brandon Roberts.
Thank you.
Have 3 students in the Robertson district. I've heard a lot about the system wasn't broke, the system was broke. This will allow the districts to have a voice that I believe each district, as Mr. Yeager pointed out, is very different in every district. This will allow those districts to have that voice. With that being said, I believe that maps B and C, in my opinion, allow those communities that have those cohesive voices that I feel would be shared, would be the better of the 3 options. I would like for you to definitely take into consideration the communities and not just the lines that you will be voting on this afternoon, to bring those communities together for a voice that will be heard here at this location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy Metcalf.
Stacy Metcalf, and I'm speaking, I'm from the Robertson District. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I also want to thank you for all the effort put into redistricting. I know it's complicated, but honestly, I think it's well worth the effort. I wanted to share why I fully support school district voting and why I am thankful for its implementation. School district voting, in my opinion, is a win-win for Buncombe County public school students and their families. It provides a fair election process. It gives voters within a district a stronger voice in choosing their school board representative. It holds school board representatives to a higher accountability. They can't be as easily swayed by special interest groups who may not share the same values, beliefs, and wishes of those voters within their district. School district voting allows candidates, when running for office, to focus and connect with voters in their district, rather than having to campaign throughout the county. School district voting will provide a more diverse selection of candidates and more residents willing to serve and run for office. And school district voting encourages diversity of opinions. School district voting is a win-win for our school system, our school board, but most importantly, it's a win-win for our students and our families.
Thank you.
Charlie Martin. Charles. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Again, my name is Charles Martin, and I am in Robertson District. I have 2 kids, just had 1 child graduate early at TC, but I am a Reynolds fan all my life. As Representative said, if you didn't go to Reynolds, shame on you. But as I have talked with plenty of people in my community, I grew up in Shiloh, so I understand the split difference when it comes down to Shiloh and into a black community. But I'm also looking at more information that the lawyer has given us and everything, that a lot of places going to end up being just like Shiloh, where the lines are going in between 2 different people, and then these people are going to vote for someone that does not represent them, but they live in a different area of the whole entire county. I think that's kind of weird and kind of strange for us to address that. So my opinion is, I think we need to probably go back to the drawing board and look at some of these lines that are crossing and making sure that each individual community is going to impact what needs to be impacted for Buncombe County. And I don't want to see us divide ourselves because we think it needs to happen, but I think some things need to change in Buncombe County, but I don't think all things need to change in Buncombe County. I left Atlanta, moved back home to Asheville. Asheville, Buncombe County is better than Atlanta's school system. So I think we got a pretty good system up here, but do we need to improve with representation where we have more people of color, more people of any ethnic background on the school board? I think we need to do that. But I do think that some of the things that are happening in A is going to challenge us, but some things in B is going to hurt us, but C, I like it better. I don't want to swallow it, but I like it better. But as he said, we can take things from one map of A and move it over to C, and take something from B and move it over. So I think we need to go around and look at the whole scenario of it and see how it's going to benefit all of us in the long run. Redistricting is a hard thing to do, but I like my district. My kids are in TC. I wish they were in Reynolds District, but my wife didn't want to move over there in the country. But I do want us to look at the aspect of it is, how is it going to benefit us? Because Rob was a tremendous help for me, so I want to thank him for sitting down with us, going over the maps and looking at everything, because I don't want things to go outside the lines where we say, well, this is a black issue, because technically, as I told people in the community, it's not a black issue. It's just a redistricting where it's going to be a better voice, but I want it to be an even voice among all districts in the county. Yield back to y'all.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair and the board, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Mr. Shatley.
So I didn't hear any questions from members of the public, so I don't think there's anything to ask Adam and Blake. But board members, do you have questions for Adam and Blake? And then we reserve some time for your discussion. Now, the board will not take any action tonight, just to let the board know and members of the public. That will occur at a later meeting. We didn't want to have a public hearing and then have some sort of action right afterwards. We wanted the ability for people to see the maps, give comment, and then the board to be able to use those comments and consider those comments. But we did want to have an opportunity for the board members to ask questions of Blake and Adam and to have any discussion over the three maps as well.
At this time, I'd recognize board members that have questions.
I have a question.
Would you speak in your mic, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Can you clarify for me the election law that specifies that only local elections are allowed this plus or minus 5% variance to a truly equal population amongst the districts?
So that's a great question. It's not a law per se. It is well established that for Congress, there is no deviation allowed. Essentially, the answer to your question is that case law has developed over time. So there's been litigation at the local government level that's occurred over time, and the courts have coalesced around that rule of plus or minus 5% for local government. So I can't point you to a statute, but that's the law or the rule that we use in all local government redistricting we have for several election cycle or redistricting cycles.
So if the exercise of redistricting takes all of our districts and puts them in this variance range of plus or minus 5% of equal population, and you've got a district that's down there on the lower end, right? Or on the upper end. You got one that's on the low end, one that's on the upper end. And you've got these islands, as we call them, or you have these issues with split blocks and all this stuff that we talked about, that there's uncertainty there, right? There's still uncertainty around those areas. But you've done your best you could, right? You've adjusted the district populations to the upper and lower extent of a potentially acceptable range, but there's still uncertainty, right? Because you haven't gone door to door, knocked on the door, figured out who's who and what's going on. Could we be sued as Buncombe County Schools by someone who says, hey, wait a minute, this is supposed to be one person, one vote, equal populations. My district that I've been put in is down here on the lower end, and there's so much uncertainty around the boundaries of my district that I don't feel properly represented. Could we be sued by someone like that?
You certainly could, but I think that we have designed the system to prevent such a claim from being brought, and that's why the important thing I don't think we need to pull up the slide, but if you think about that maximum and minimum scenario, that's based on the census population, and that's what is looked at in redistricting issues and cases. And we've created a system where no matter where all of those people fall in those split census blocks, we are going to be within that plus or minus 5% range. It is, nothing is certain, and yes, I suppose someone could bring a claim, but I feel as solid as we possibly can, given the uncertainty that you all have. I think we have complied. I think we have complied with one person, one vote, no matter where all of those split census blocks fall out.
So even though we did not ask for this, the school board did not ask for this, the county commissioners did not ask for this, this law was passed in the General Assembly.
Yes.
Are we the ones that get sued?
Probably.
Okay. So one thing that we didn't take into account is population change over time. So this is based off of a, what's the correct word, centennial or whatever it's called. Decennial census. If the population changes dramatically, which we see a lot of in Buncombe County, do we have the ability to change district lines again, even though it's not with, I mean, if it's, let's say so right now it's 2023, or 2024, excuse me.
Right.
6 more years until the decennial census, but we know, right, that there's giant apartment complexes being built in different parts of the county, in different districts, and it's just overwhelmingly abundant that you've got have now successfully departed from this plus or minus 5%. Do we need to redistrict again at that point in time, or could we redistrict again at that point in time?
You really could not. Once you get on a regular cycle with electoral districts, like you are headed towards, you can only redistrict every 10 years after the census, or if you annex or de-annex population. You can't just redistrict because you know that certain areas are growing at different rates. And I will tell you, Blake and I did a lot of local government redistricting in 2021, 2022. I'm thinking of a place like the town of Mooresville in the Charlotte area. They had districts 57% out of balance, wild swings. And it's just targeted to the federal census every 10 years. So everybody knew those districts were out of balance, and we brought them back in balance, and they'll probably be out of balance 10 years from now when we do it again. But that's just the way the system's designed. So no, in almost no scenario will you redistrict again before 2031, 2032, when the census data comes out.
I feel like this is like an insurance, like what if there's a qualifying event? So like what if the merger study says you need to merge school systems? I would assume that would force us to redraw these districts yet again, because you now have the addition of the center of the donut. You have this, the very densely populated Asheville City Center.
Right.
That's, as we merge boards, that's not going to translate into one person, one vote, equal size districts. So we will have to go through this again, potentially as soon as 2025.
Yeah, so that's definitely, that's a special case, and here's what here's how I would imagine that playing out. In all likelihood, if the districts are going to be consolidated, it's going to be through an enactment of the General Assembly. There is another possible route, but I think that's unlikely.
What are those other routes?
It has to do, I may need to look that up.
It's the county commissioners.
It's the county commissioners and the State Board of Education.
Yeah, there's three routes. One's through the county, one's through the state board, by the request of the two boards or by the two districts, and the other one is through the General Assembly. But, I mean, either way, if it occurred, that would probably be an event that would require some redistricting.
Right, but, so a new school district would be created. It would not, in my view, be redistricting. There would be a new entity, and whatever that authorizing legislation was, or if there was a consolidation plan that went through the county or the State Board of Education, in my view, that plan would set the districts or describe the districts or lay out how those districts should be created. So I would think of it almost as starting from scratch with a new entity, and the legislation very well might include the districts in that piece of legislation.
So you're saying that currently this law, H66, that was passed, the legal entity that they are ascribing this task to for redistricting, electoral redistricting, is Buncombe County Schools.
Correct.
But in the event of a school merger, there is a new entity produced, so the law no longer applies to that new entity?
I would basically say that that's correct.
So theoretically, we could have just paid for all of this to happen. The county commissioners could look at the study and say, well, by golly, there's $50 million worth of savings here on the table for the taxpayers of Buncombe County. We want to merge these schools.
Right. You just made up that number, correct?
Huh?
You just made up that number?
That was hypothetical.
Thank you.
Just to clarify.
Clarify, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay. It's okay, I interrupted him first. We'll just triangulate interrupting each other. Point being, for whatever reason, if they decided to merge the school system, the new entity could potentially decide to just go back to the old way, that we're going to go back to an at-large voting system, and the districts are going to look just like they used to with the addition of Asheville City Schools. Is going to stay the same attendance zone line, same whatever. We're going to go back to that way of voting. Does that new entity have the power to do that?
Well, generally, the electoral system is included in whatever authorizing legislation there is, or in some cases, it might have been a merger, or it might have come through litigation. But generally speaking, local government entities do not have the ability to change their method of elections. Forget any of this, what we're doing here. The Buncombe County school system could not, on its own, have decided that we want to have electoral districts, or could not have decided we want to go fully at large. That's not within the power of local government.
So if that's the case, then the newly created entity of Asheville Buncombe County Schools would have to go through a redistricting process again, because we would be bound by the current voting system.
Whatever that new district is, unless it was at-large or residency district, it would need to be districted. It would need to comply with one person, one vote. So let's just pretend the General Assembly is going to do it. The General Assembly could decide that there are going to be 9 at-large members. Done. Don't need to redistrict. Could decide that there are going to be 9 residency districts and cut it up based on high schools or something else. Don't need to redistrict. But obviously, if there are 9 electoral districts, if there are 8 and 1, if there are 7 and 2, any system that has electoral districts is going, you can call it redistricted, I might call it districted because it's the first time for that new entity. But yes, districts will need to be created in that scenario.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's like a big question I've had all along is what happens after the merger? If there is a merger, what happens then? Lastly is, I've taken these maps, as you heard one of the public commenters state, I've taken maps to the various communities within the Reynolds District. And those communities, in some cases like Shiloh, have historically been split up multiple ways. In other cases, those communities are elementary school attendance zones. It's that simple. It's just like the PTO and advisory council for Hall Creek or Bell or whatever. And I've shown these to them, and they've looked at them like with a really sharp eye, and they've caught like potential, like, I won't comment on the questions that I've gotten yet, but I'll save those for later. But the things that they've picked up on is if we have to do this, like this little line right here that doesn't really follow our elementary school zone, attendance zone, could that be changed? Because like, that just makes more sense. It follows the road. It doesn't cut through this farmer's pasture or whatever. And it would just make a lot more sense. Can we as a board tonight, if we do coalesce around a certain direction we're going, is there still time to request like small changes that may just adjust these lines by a handful of streets or a handful of blocks or whatever, just to make a little bit more like operational sense, I guess, from a representational perspective?
Right. Yeah, I think the answer to that is definitely yes. In some of these plans, the wiggle room is close to zero, at least in certain places, and so that's why you may have a line where you might otherwise wish it was somewhere else, because there's no way to make the numbers work. But yes, we're happy to zero in on certain areas, and in between this and the next meeting, if you want to give us some homework to look at a number of spots to see if there's anything we can do, we're glad to. Blake may, if there are things you're thinking of now, Blake may be able to tell us, and he may not, but he may. I just can't do that, and here's why. But we're happy to.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Amazing. Amy, let me just say, excuse me, Amy. Mr. Elliott has ridden this horse hard to try to figure out what is the best for his district.
Put it up wet, too.
What?
You ride a horse hard, and you put it up wet in the rain, from riding in the rain. No.
Well, I was going to say that you just didn't want to milk your neighbor's cows, but I just,
Wait, I like the farm.
that being
the farm
said, I
banter.
will now
This is great.
recognize Amy Churchill.
So my question is, I'm just thinking about the scenario with the possible merger, and as Rob pointed out, the possibility of having to do this again in a year and a half time. As a conservative, and a very fiscal conservative at that, so maybe I'm old school conservative, I have a question. How much money, ballpark, do you know that we've spent so far on this endeavor? And what could we expect to spend again in 18 months, so to speak?
I think Dean's going to answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I mean, this is just ballparking, but I mean, it's over $40,000.
$40,000.
Part of that is due to the complexity of this. I mean, I would say it actually becomes, we're talking a lot about consolidation, which, I mean, a group to do the report has not even been hired yet. So that's completely really not even on the table, but I appreciate everybody trying to think ahead and think towards that. The drawing actually becomes a little easier if there is consolidation, because you don't really have split census blocks at that moment in time. So part of the cost of this has been traditionally a little higher than it would if we didn't have those complexities, but it is over that mark, which is actually less than what we thought it was going to be, really because Blake was able, he sharpened his pencils and was able to figure out a way to do this without having to obtain data outside of the census. Because remember, at one point...
Yeah, we thought we might. We were very uncomfortable with that, but we thought we may have no choice, and then Blake developed this model that I think works real well. I want to just say one thing, and I agree that because of the complexity, this costs more than imagine that scenario with 120,000 people in 6 districts. It's just not as complicated. If the General Assembly writes the bill and draws your districts, doesn't cost you anything, but it's imposed upon you. So in some scenarios, you may not even, I don't know if that's better or worse. I'm just saying that there are scenarios where there will be no cost because you won't have the ability to hire a consultant to assist.
Well, I just remember sitting in on some meetings, and I believe that certain individuals that had brought this bill forward were actually really encouraging the school system to draw those districts. I'd like to think that he was doing that to try to give us some autonomy and local control, but you've just brought up the fact that perhaps it would have cost them a little bit of skin in the game. Again, you're talking about 40,000. Let's just say that we do another 20,000 if we do this again. Now you're looking at $60,000. That's almost 2 beginning teacher salaries, which I am sad to say in the state of North Carolina that that's the equivalent of 2 new teacher salaries, but here we are. I just think that this money could have been spent in so many better ways than to, as one of our public speakers and representatives for the North Carolina actually pointed out, we've spent a lot of money to play politics. I'm very frustrated with that and have been for the last 2 years that this has been discussed behind closed doors. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else have comment? Yes.
Well, I have a question, and it kind of goes back to what...
Speak into your mic.
Sorry. I think it's going to be for you, Blake, and it kind of goes to what Mr. Elliott was asking. Given that we, like one of our, I think in the beginning, one of our main goals was to keep the high schools intact as much as possible, but then also to keep our elementary schools intact. And Blake, if you do have a small deviation from an elementary school line, would it be fair to say if you were able to keep it whole, you would have kept it whole? Can you hear me?
The question's for Blake.
Sorry, I was muted for a moment. Just to make sure I heard correctly, your question was if it was possible to keep an elementary district whole, would I have kept it whole?
Correct. Because we were talking about like trying to tweak the places where there may be a small deviation from that elementary school line, but I would imagine mathematically, if you did that, it was probably because you had to.
Yes, keeping in mind that often the census block boundaries don't follow the attendance area boundaries, but yes, the short answer is yes.
Which did you prioritize over the other, keeping the elementary school districts whole or the census block areas whole?
So the census block is not a negotiable. That's a must. So I can't follow a line that is not a census block line.
Okay.
There are cases where the actual Buncombe County school administrative, the jurisdictional boundary doesn't follow a census block boundary. So there are those cases where a line is not following a census block line, but those were, as Adam has said, those were imposed on the situation. So I did not consider an option of dividing census blocks.
I appreciate that. And I just wanted to just give just a few thoughts. As we heard from some different people in the county, I think when this was initially put out in the public, I'll be honest, I was like, I really don't see what the big deal is, because I think when this originally was being pushed, in my head, what I envisioned is the people that lived in the Irwin district were going to get to vote for the people that were running in the Irwin district. The people that lived in the North Buncombe district were going to get to vote for the people that lived in the North Buncombe district. In fact, even at this meeting, what we are doing now was referred to as school district voting. And if it was school district voting, it really wouldn't leave such a bad taste in my mouth. When I was a teacher at Irwin High School and my oldest was, in the Irwin district, part of our identity was Pat Bryant, who is here today and unfortunately didn't speak in public comment. But he was part of our identity, as Kim Clemens is part of the Irwin identity now. And so the thing, and I'm literally like getting chills thinking about it, the thing that just makes me sad is that piece is gone, And I think if it could have been, like if the law weren't the law and it wasn't one vote for, if it didn't have to be divided evenly, I'll be honest, I would be for this. I didn't really have anything against it. I didn't necessarily think it was broken before, but I would have way less problems with what's going on now. As we look at the data, and one thing, I did ask for that percent change data because I think it was really important for us to, I don't ever want to like weigh heavier someone's opinion, but when you have a couple schools that really aren't being impacted at all, and then you have one school which we all knew from the beginning was going to be Reynolds that is being just hammered, and just being essentially torn apart as far as who is representing them. I think that it's important that along with weighing in the spreadsheet that we have as far as like who voted for what, in our, I think that not overwhelmingly, but option A was voted for a lot. But then when you really look at it, and I should have asked for this data too, when you really look at it, if you sort of put a weight on it, weigh the voting, those people that are being impacted the most, the TC district and the Reynolds district are being pretty impacted pretty heavily. It did seem to me in the data, and I don't know of a good way to, I'm sure I could figure one out. I'm sure Blake could, to put a weight on it. But the people in those districts really seem to gravitate toward option C. At our last meeting, for me, I was just like, okay, well, we have what people voted for, and clearly it seems like people like option A. And option A also has the least amount of population change, which spoke to me. But I think it's important for us to really look at those districts that are being the most heavily impacted and weigh that in our decision, and not just which districts are the most contiguous, and which option is the most contiguous, and which option has the least amount of change. So I would just ask that we do that. I think that was something that was kind of asked for in the responses from the feedback. I do want to say I do appreciate the people that have shown up to speak. I think it's important for us to hear from you, and I also appreciate the almost 120 people that took the time out to fill out the Google form, and the countless number of emails that we've gotten on this. We do really appreciate the public input. I don't think there's any great option, but ultimately it is what it is, and we've got to do it. We've got to pick something. But I think we really need to be mindful of those districts that are being impacted the most in this.
Thank you. I just want to focus us. This is on the election for the school board, not where your student is going to school. Two very separate things. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify one thing, because I was going to ask about the elementary schools too. When we first started talking about this, and we talked about the traditional high school districts, which someone said it earlier, it's the way it's been forever. And if you live in the Irwin district, you're a warrior, and you're really, really proud of that. And if you're a Rocket, and I grew up as a Rocket, and I can say this, that people in that community, they still go. I mean, there's thousands of people that show up at their football game because they were a Rocket, and they're still a Rocket. And so I think it does take a lot of the identity piece away. But going back to Amanda's question on the elementary schools, because I really didn't think about it and the impact that would have on the Irwin district, and I'm sorry, I'm just talking about the Irwin district. But Amanda brought it up, and in looking at the options, there are 3 of the 5 elementary schools in the Irwin district that are going to be impacted by who their representative is. Their kids will still go to West Buncombe, Leicester, and Woodfin, but a couple of those options, it will impact and divide those elementary schools.
The representation.
The representation, not the attendance. And I said,
Yeah.
they will attend Leicester, but they could have 2 different people
Exactly.
representing them. And as involved as I am in the 8 schools, and again, I recognize, Madam Chair, We are here for every child.
Exactly.
I've got 22,000 babies, is what I said
You've
yesterday.
been a busy camper.
I have. But I believe that no matter what district I represent, we have 22,000 babies that it's our responsibility to make the right decision for. But going back to the elementary piece, do we have the percent of the elementary schools that are being split based on those options? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you understand?
I think I do. Blake, do you have that? I'm not sure that we've looked at or counted elementary splits.
Correct. I have not generated that. And it's, some of the high school attendance areas have 2 elementary schools, or the number, I believe, ranges from 2 elementary school districts in a high school attendance area to 5. So that would also, that's going to vary. There's no way that Irwin, for example, which has 5, as I recall, and Owen has 2, the numbers might vary just based on that. And Irwin is also distinctive in that it has the largest number of split blocks. So that was a major constraint in terms of decisions being made, particularly in terms of drawing the line between the Irwin district and the North Buncombe district.
Okay, thank you. One more comment. I've been riding buses this week, and it's been the best week. If you haven't done that before, every parent needs to get on a bus and ride the bus. The interaction the kids have with bus drivers is phenomenal. They love their bus drivers, and we love them. But I rode with Woodfin yesterday, and
No, she rode a Woodfin bus yesterday.
I rode a Woodfin bus yesterday, excuse me, and I was in Sandy Mush the day before, and today I was at Irwin High School. And so anyway, but for Woodfin, I was just totally shocked at that North Reynolds Mountain area and how we would go up a hill on one of these 2-lane roads right past, I think it's Reynolds Village or Reynolds whatever, and Reynolds Village was in the Woodfin district, and you would skip a road because it was part of North Buncombe's district, but we'd go down the next road, and it was the Woodfin district. So all of that complicated situations has also made this a very difficult task. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
And then we got Asheville City, literally on one side of the street. We have this side of the street is Woodfin, this side of the street is Asheville City.
Yes.
It's very complicated. So the work y'all have done, I very much appreciate the details and explaining it for us.
I think it's a good time for us to congratulate these 2 attorneys and
I
what they've
agree.
done for us.
Blake's a demographer, not an attorney.
Well,
That's why we work well together. You think I can create those ranges?
yeah, but it has been very comforting to me, and I'm sure all members of this board, to have this level of expertise to drive us through this horrible experience. And you've been very kind as we have split hairs over our decision and what we're doing. And I truly appreciate that, and I'm sure you all do.
Yes.
Any other comments from board members?
If we could maybe just, is this a time where we could talk about some of the different options? Okay.
Could I just, yeah, there's a question, I kind of understood we were in sort of question mode. Could I ask one
I'm
more
going to
question?
buy you a question mark, and
Okay.
I'm just going to put it right
Yeah.
here.
I think there was a Marvel character that had that.
But he's still going to ask, so.
He still
no,
is. I wasn't, you know.
Just to be clear, can you clarify for us the timeline in the law when this has to be complete? How much wiggle room there is to debate stuff, as some folks have said, go back to the drawing board. Is there a time to truly go back to the drawing board? This law was was passed. Then the law had technical errors. Then the law was corrected, came back out in, September or something? Can't remember. And so we have had from more or less from the time the budget was passed, when I think the correction was passed, until June 25th to come up with pretty sophisticated analysis around this process. As I understand it, the date that these have to be implemented is June 25th. The filing date for school board elections is July 14th or something like that. You know, can you remind us of sort of the timeline that we're on, and for the benefit of the public, for them to hear the timeline that we're on and when things have to be finalized so that we can actually have a functional school board election in come November?
Yeah, that's a great question. On our end, once you have, well, let me tell you, let me just walk you through the steps the remaining steps as I see them. I think the next point that you need to get to is essentially to coalesce around what I would refer to as a preferred plan. You have not voted on it, but it is apparent, you could vote to adopt a preferred plan or indicate a preferred plan, but you have not approved the plan yet. What that will do is will give us the direction to prepare the resolution that you're going to need to ultimately adopt. So you could get to that point tonight. You also could not get to that point tonight, and I know you may not be there yet. So we need a preferred plan. I need to draft the resolution. At whatever the next meeting is, you'll consider that resolution, discuss it as much as you want, and then it's just it's a motion to approve the resolution to adopt option blank. It'll all be laid out there for you. And Blake will be working on creating something that are called shape files, which are basically files that are recognized in mapping software. And so we will export those to the Board of Elections. They will import them into their system, and that will give them the data that they need to assign each voter to a district. And from that, they then create the voter rolls and all the documents they need. How long do they need to do that? A few weeks to a month, maybe less. They shouldn't need multiple months. So could you go out into April, May with this process? Yeah, I technically think that you could, if the board felt like you needed to. If not, obviously, speaking from the perspective of the Board of Elections, I would think the more time the better, but they should be able to do this within a handful of weeks.
And any subsequent reversioning that we might request is going to cost us an additional, like, as I put the three maps in front of people, like, each one of those maps costs, $12,000. So, going forward, any incremental reversioning we ask that requires like new approaches, or anything like that is going to cost an incremental sums of money, correct? Like if it involves something of magnitude.
Well, so I would say if you want us to look at a handful of areas and say, can we move this line here, no, there's not going to be an incremental charge for that. Here's what there would be incremental charges for, two things. One is if you essentially want a new plan, and a new plan is more than moving a line or two. But if you truly want a new plan, or if you want or need me to come back in person, those are the two things at this point in the process that I'm just being honest, that will cost extra money. And so yes, so specific tweaks, no. You've paid for the full process. We've promised you 3 plans, 3 in-person visits, and we're not going to charge you for looking at a few things here or there. It would be a new plan or additional in-person visits.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Certainly.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott, you asked for the exact date, so we've looked up the statute so we can give you that date. Originally, Session Law 2023-32 set a date of February 1st, 2024. That was amended by Session Law 2023-128 that reads, the board shall adopt the new electoral districts by June 30th, 2024.
That's in the statute.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Other,
So theoretically, we could, I mean, with the way the law is written, theoretically, we could not actually have the vote that chooses the maps until June 30th.
Correct.
Basically 2 weeks before filing period for the election,
Yeah, and I
which
think
is not enough time for the Board of Elections to upload maps and all that.
if I were the Board of Elections, I would prefer that you adopt it earlier than that, if at all possible.
Abide by the law is all I'm saying.
Yep.
That's what we keep saying around here.
okay. Amy?
So I was just looking at, and I appreciate you adding the key elements in your presentation, but I really appreciate in option C that it seems like it does keep neighborhoods, quite a few neighborhoods that maybe weren't whole in the past, to make them whole, and then it looks like it keeps quite a few of the elementary schools in this one, if I'm understanding it right, more together. And I really like the most additional wiggle room, especially when we're talking about, the 3 districts that in option A has no wiggle room, basically. But I do appreciate that maybe the only good thing that has come out of this is more representation for the Shiloh neighborhood. So if there is a silver lining to all of this, I would say that's it. And the other thing I just wanted to say is I am so grateful that you and Blake are very pro-public education, because I think y'all have treated us very well all around. Thank you. And thank you.
Madam Chair, just one more comment. And Amy, I agree with you. That's, again, when I look at the Irwin district, that does create the least change in terms of only 2 elementary schools instead of 3. But then I go back to my roots.
Excuse me, are you talking about option C? when you
Option
speak to
C,
that?
thank you. I apologize. I didn't say option
it's
C.
me. I just need to know.
But going back to Mr. Ager's comments, if you look at C, and I live in Fairview like my sister does and the Agers, that basically if you live on going out 74 on the left-hand side, if you live on the left-hand side, your representative could be someone that lives in the Black Mountain area. And I just go back to that Rocket Pride. I don't know that parents understand that what they wanted was just the polls in Reynolds to vote for just the people running for Reynolds. Well, those results wouldn't have changed if we'd have had it that way. But the bottom line is, going back to Fairview, 27% of the people, Rob, is that right, will have a different representative. So I just have to make that comment to be really clear that people understand how many people will be impacted by their representation, not by where their child goes to school, but that's that's a quarter of the number of voters in the Reynolds district. I just have to make that comment, sorry. Thank you.
Any other comments? Judy?
I would just like to add my gratitude as well. This has been a mammoth undertaking. I've been in education for a really, really long time, and I don't know that I've ever witnessed anything quite like this. But I really appreciate, along with the others here, your expertise, and Blake as well, from long distances to come and try to tweak this and break it down in ways that are as understandable as can be made. Even at the very best, it's confusing. So we really thank you and appreciate your efforts in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm curious, are we at a place where we would like to kind of talk about a map of the maps that we've been given, one that you would choose? Are we at a place, would you shake your head that the answer is yes? Boy, your heads are not going anywhere.
I mean, I would be open to sharing what's my favorite at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can
I'd
we
be
do
open
that?
to sharing that.
Point, yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, then I'm going to, can I start with Irwin? Would that be all right with you, Amanda?
As I said
I
just a
believe your
moment ago.
name's Kim Clemens and not Irwin. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm proud of my warriors. At this point, it would be option C for me. Again, it hurts me to say that because I know the impact across the county, but it creates the least amount of impact in my elementary schools in the urban district.
Okay, Peggy?
I also would vote for C, because I think that's the least amount of change that we would have to do.
Amy?
C.
Judy? Amanda?
Yeah, I too, especially factoring in, I think for me, the biggest thing was input from, and I hate to say that, like that I'm waiting, some schools' input over other schools' input, but, those districts that were really being impacted the most from this, it seemed pretty overwhelmingly, option C appealed to them most. So I too would be, if I have to give one, that would be the one I would give.
Okay. Rob?
Yeah, so we're put into a position where, in my opinion, we typically make decisions based around like what provides the best outcome for students. And in this case, because this redistricting wasn't really approached from that standpoint, we're having to make a decision that is based off of what option causes the least damage to our school communities. That's how I feel in the Reynolds District. As I've taken these maps around to the different communities in our school district, the Bell Elementary School, Hall Creek, Oakley, Shiloh, Reynolds, Fairview, in every single one of these options, in the Reynolds District, in every single one of those options, one of those communities or more gets split. It's just a matter of which one, right? So in option A, Bell gets split in half. So half of the population of Bell Elementary School will be represented by somebody who lives in District 2, while the other half of that elementary school is going to be represented by somebody who lives in District 3. That is ungodly frustrating. When you go to option B, it splits Hall Creek in half. So half of the school population is represented by somebody from District 2. The other half is represented by somebody from District 3. How are you going to feel if your child goes to a school, but you're the constituent of the next district over? And right now, sure, we can all have nice agreements among each other to say, like, we represent every child in the county. But what happens if somebody gets on this board who's territorial and says, I don't care what you have to say. I don't care. Your child goes to Bell Elementary, and it's in District 3, but you live in District 2. You're not my constituent anymore. I don't care. That's what this does. It creates territoriality, whether you like it or not. And when you look at this, it happens not just in the Reynolds District, where some community gets split. It's just a matter of who. It also happens in T.C. Robertson. You're going to have folks that live in Ballantree or the southern part of the T.C. Robertson District near Glen Arden, whose students are going to go to T.C. Robertson, but their representative is in District 3. It's just going to cause a world of issues, in my opinion, from a representational perspective. It is going to cause friction. So I'm to this point where what option causes the least damage to our school communities? That's where I'm at with it. It breaks my heart. We're moving from the Reynolds District to like a Hunger Games version. We're District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're no longer the Reynolds District anymore. We're District 3. I don't want to be District 3. I want to be the Reynolds District. So it is. It's tough. And so I appreciate the demographer and the lawyer who put the options together based around keeping communities intact. That is what was in our heart when we asked for that. They came up with this concept of option C because it does. It keeps Bell Elementary completely whole. That whole community will now be represented by District 2, but at least they're all together. Hall Creek stays all together. They will be District 2. or District 3, excuse me, but at least they're all together. Shiloh, there's an option here for the Shiloh community that has been historically split representationally to be brought together as a full community. And it comes down to Fairview. You split Fairview along Highway 74. I live in Fairview. I could be totally territorial myself right now and say, I live in Fairview. All I care about is Fairview, people. I don't like option C because which splits Fairview in half. But I'm not going to be the guy that says, I don't care about Oakley. I don't care about Shiloh. I don't care about Hall Creek, and I don't care about Bell, because I care about every single one of them. So I want the option that splits the communities the least. And when you look at the data, the hard data that these folks provided us, option C does that. Option C only splits, takes 26.6%, I think is the number, or 24 point, whatever the heck it is. But it's the lowest number of redistributed Reynolds District families into other districts. So just from that simple fact alone, I could just close my eyes and say, I guess that's what I'm going to do. But I know that option C also frustrates the mess out of folks in Fairview. It frustrates the mess out of folks in Ballantree. They don't like the fact that their child is going to TC and they got to go to a Robertson or a Reynolds guy to advocate for their child. So this concept of this gives people a stronger voice, I disagree. It does not give you a stronger voice. If you live in District 2 and all of your kids go to school buildings that are in District 3, how does that give you a stronger voice? So I don't get it. I don't understand that. Higher accountability. If all your kids go to the school across the line there and you're not the constituent of that representative, technically, you don't hold him accountable. He doesn't care about your voice, potentially. Whereas right now, with the countywide vote, I'm just as much accountable to somebody in Barnardsville or Pisgah Elementary, somewhere else in this beautiful county, than as accountable as I have to be to somebody in Fairview. So I don't like it. I'm frustrated. Everybody that I've talked to is really, really frustrated. The fact that they're going to have their kids going to a school but be represented by somebody else from a different district, and they're not going to be the constituent of the representative for the person for their school. So just simply based on the data, unfortunately, and the concept of keeping communities together as much as possible, I've got to support C as well.
Thank you. I'll go with C. My district is the least affected, and
Yes, you get a bunch of my folks.
I'll be happy to represent your people and anybody else.
Those Woodfin Wolverines very well. As a Woodfin Wolverine myself, you better represent them well.
I'll have to learn how to spell that word.
Yeah, and think about all the parent complaints that will happen, like again with Lester Elementary. Oh, well, no, Ms. Franklin is your rep.
Her number is?
Yeah, here's her number. Dial 1-800 Ms. Franklin. But that will be confusing to parents, very, very confusing.
And
Thanks, Rob. I'm frustrated too. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say to that, I think right now we have the great opportunity here as the board members that are currently sitting here to hopefully show future board members that, like you had said, Ms. Plemons, earlier, it really is 22,000 students, and I get a whole lot of phone calls from a whole lot of schools that don't have Rams as their mascots, and they get equal representation. The students get equal representation, and I believe every one of us on this board feels very strongly about that. I really hope that whoever's on this board in the future recognizes that this is Buncombe County Schools, and you are responsible for making decisions for the whole of all of our students. And that's a very big ask, so we don't go into it lightly.
One last comment, too, if I may. There is a short session coming up, and if the folks that wanted this to happen realize how many people they're about to make really, really mad by this representational issue, there's a chance to repeal this law. It can still be made right. So I just wanted to point that out.
But tonight, we are seeking consensus, and I believe we have consensus. Is that correct, Mr. Shatley?
Sounds like it.
Adam?
an official vote until our
No,
next
no,
board.
not at
all.
I just want to just clarify that.
Seeking consensus.
Yes.
And I believe we have achieved that. So at this time, if I'm correct, we will ask our attorneys to create a resolution for us, and that resolution will be brought to us at the March meeting, which is very short time frame. But I'm sure Tharrington Smith can do it in a very short time.
Is that sufficient time, Adam?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. He's shaking his head going, absolutely, and I'm,
And board members, I mean, as Adam said, we obviously want to give the Board of Elections sufficient time, and Blake sufficient time to create the shape files, to get that. I mean, but it's not going to take months. If this is something that we get to March, or you sleep on this, and Adam's going to go ahead and prepare the resolution, but you could potentially wait till April if that's what you wanted to do on the resolution too, or have another meeting about it if that's what you prefer to do as well. So the next board meeting is March 7th. Thank you for the note. So that's when we'll reconsider that resolution, or consider the resolution, but it does not necessarily mean you have to take a vote at that time. This is, other than the statute saying we got to get this done by June 30th and the timeline with the Board of Elections, we're on your schedule.
okay, and I truly appreciate that. I appreciate the work that the board has done and their willingness to seek consensus on this, and we've all given something, some of us more than others. And if we can get that resolution from you folks, then the potential is that we could vote on this at the March 7th board meeting and then give that document to the Board of Elections, and they would have ample time to fix what they have to fix. Is that correct?
Yes.
So any other comments or whatever? Are you finished with us? Okay. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
These notes of appreciation that you have been given are truly heartfelt.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank you.
We've enjoyed working with you all. I feel badly about the circumstances you were put in, but you've been a pleasure to work with, honestly.
Thank you. That's good to know. All right. If that's the case, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That's Judy. Second?
Second.
It's Kim. Okay. And all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thanks, Blake.